we are this social species. We really do, come out of the womb with this remarkable ability to learn from the people around us, from our parents, from our siblings, from our peers, from our teachers. Cities play to that, and in some sense we are an urban species because our ability to work together is our greatest talent. I think it's a great shame in light of that America and many other countries have often treated our cities as ugly stepchildren. Right? It's not as if everyone should live in a city. The fact that there are choices that people have in America for different places to live is a great virtue of this country. But we shouldn't act as if there's anything more virtuous about living in a suburb or rural area than living in a city. And we really shouldn't have this trifecta of policies, the massive subsidization of highways, the fetish that we've made out of home ownership that really bribes people out of urban apartments into suburban homes, and the enormous challenges that we've placed on cities with our local school system. These three things together are just an enormous burden that cities face. Cities shouldn't get, handouts. They shouldn't get subsidies. But they do deserve a level playing field, and they deserve to be treated as one part of this great fabric of America, and a part that is as vital, as important as any other. When we talk about the failures of public schools there in our cities, there are really two things that are going on. One of which is the concentration of poverty that exists in our cities. And that's not an accident. But it's important to recognize that the presence of poverty in cities is not a sign that cities are failing. It's actually a sign that cities are succeeding in a way, because cities don't make people poor, they attract poor people. They attract poor people with economic opportunity, with better social services, with the ability to get around without a car for every adult. One of the pieces of research that I discuss in my book is that when we build new subway stops, poverty rates increase in neighboring blocks. That isn't a sign that those subways are making those people poor. It's a sign that subways are doing what they ought to do, which is to attract poor people so that they actually don't have to buy cars. Cities continue to do this, and that's a great thing about cities, but it's also a challenge, because in fact people who start with fewer resources do require more social services. And that's also particularly true in the education sphere, where education plays a huge role in doing whatever we think we can do to fight for social justice. Education is a huge part of that. And our schools, our urban schools, are failing too often, and that's in some sense the greatest challenge that our cities face. It's so crucial because, of course, education is the bedrock on which urban and national success ultimately rests. If you look across cities, the share of the population with a college degree plays an extraordinarily strong role in explaining which cities were able to come back from the difficult years of the 1950s and 1960s. And as you compare across metropolitan areas, as the share of the population in the metropolitan area with a college degree increases by 10%, people's wages go up by about 8%, holding their education constant, meaning no matter how many years of your education you personally have, as the share of the people with a college degree around you goes up by 10%, your wages go up on average by 8%. When it comes to redistribution, you really can't localize. Because if you expect cities and towns to actually take care of poor people with some sort of lavish welfare system, the rich people and companies just leave. Right? So what we have to do in terms of taking care of redistribution in this country, that has to be done at higher levels of government. And I think as I look forward, I think the most promising area for real social welfare investments are in education. Because whereas it's very easy for people to push back on transfers to adults in various ways, it's very hard for people to really say that a 9-year-old kid born in an awful situation, growing up in an awful neighborhood, that kid doesn't deserve something. That's just a very hard thing for a human being to say no to. And I think we have been moving towards more federal investments in education, and I think that's a very good thing, and I think we need to do more. I think it's the balance between, a combination of more federal support, encouraging more innovation, encouraging more competition at the local level, if you will. I think all of that's good. An example of a private-public partnership gone terribly wrong, and the private-public partnership involves none other than Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr, who in the 1790s, Burr was responding to the sense that America's cities had to do something about their water situation. This is in the wake of a yellow fever epidemic which had run through cities like Philadelphia and New York, and Philadelphia responded with a purely public system. Latrobe played a major role in making this happen, and that proved reasonably successful. Burr had the idea that he was going to set up a private company that was going to be subsidized by the state. And he got Hamilton, his arch enemy, most of the time, but to be his legal counsel and to represent him on the Federalist City Council. Burr handles his own interests in the state legislature. And together they came up with the Manhattan Water Company, which was supposed to provide clean water, but it was implicitly subsidized or explicitly subsidized with the ability to run a bank. Now, the problem is that actually running a bank is a heck of a lot more profitable than providing clean water. So the Manhattan Water Company did plenty of banking and relatively little water production. And New York actually didn't get clean water until it had massive local investment. Again, this is a local infrastructure initiative, the Croton Aqueduct, which actually delivered in a purely public fashion clean water to the city of New York. Of course, the Manhattan Water Company is still with us. Its name is J.P. Morgan Chase, which was the Chase Manhattan Bank, which was the bank of the Manhattan Water Company. And I think that story stands as a warning sign that, in fact, we do need to worry about things that involve the combination of private and public. But there are cases in which private production will actually be more efficient. I mean, there's no one size fits all, but it's not as if we should think that, you know, gosh, if we just hand this thing over to the private sector, it'll all be great. We need to be actually smart about this.